We're all here. It's 2 minutes after 7, so I'd like to start. Uh, Welcome all to the Town Council special meeting of Tuesday, August 23rd. We're here in council chambers. Noel, will you call the roll?
Tim Slocum.
Here.
John Walsh.
Here.
David Borowee.
Present.
Kim James. John Mylum.
Here.
Sylvia Nichols. Here. Sandy Pavano. Here. Peter Talbot.
Here.
David Bellmer.
Here.
The quorum is present.
Thank you. Please rise for the pledge.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome. Thank you for all coming. We now move to item 3, which is a call for the public hearing for an amendment of $276,000 to the fiscal year 2021-22 Water Pollution Control Department. I'll read the motion. Be it resolved, the Town Council approves Resolution 082322-1. Be it resolved, the Town Council shall hold a public hearing at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, September 13th, to consider an amendment for $276,000 to the fiscal year 2021-2022 Water Pollution Control Department WPCD operating budget. Be it further resolved, the town manager shall cause a notice of said public hearing to be posted and published according to the law. Therein is the motion. We have a second. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously, and thank you. Okay. Now, after having watched a very informative presentation to the Board of Education the other day, I do watch YouTube reruns related to town governance. And it was presented by Jeff at the request of their chairman, Anthony Perugini, and they had a wonderful discussion, Jeff, on the guidelines for advocacy for the pre-referendum. And since we're voting on the referendum tonight, I wanted to give the council and the public a more fuller understanding of what we're up against before they make their vote. So with that, Jeff, also I want to encourage the council to ask any questions they so choose. There is never a question that isn't a smart question or a bad question. So please. But Jeff, I'm going to let you go. Well, there's a few, but I didn't hear any from the Board of Ed. I was impressed.
Thank you. So what you need to understand about the pre-referendum advocacy prohibitions is that they are intended to provide a level playing field with respect to the question itself that's on the ballot. So the election laws have set up a structure intended to avoid a municipality which theoretically has greater resources, deeper pockets than the typical voter from slanting the playing field. So once the referendum is pending, which if you do in fact adopt or approve the submission of the referendum questions to the November 8th ballot, then we will have a pending referendum. Then we have what's called an advocacy ban, but that ban applies to, number one, advocacy, and I'll give you what the definition of advocacy is in a minute, and number two, using public funds or public resources, okay? So it doesn't cause anyone to lose their First Amendment rights. It doesn't cause anyone, by virtue of being a public official or not, to lose the ability to indicate what their position is with respect to a question on the ballot. It restricts your ability to advocate for or against the passage of the question using public funds or public resources. The regulatory agency that enforces this statutory prohibition is the State Elections Enforcement Commission. And so we look to the State Elections Enforcement Commission decisions to identify the definition of advocacy. And it's, to me at least, pretty straightforward, okay? Advocacy, according to the case law, is defined as communications which urge a particular result either by express wording of advocacy or when considered as a whole, would make the ordinary reasonable person believe that a particular result is urged. Okay? And if you look at some of the cases that find violations of the advocacy ban, it's pretty obvious stuff. You know, threatening communication such as, you know, if the budget doesn't pass, the Board of Ed is going to have to eliminate preschool and sports at the high school. That's pretty clearly urging a yes vote, okay? Likewise, if you had a communication that said, if you approve these projects, your taxes are going to force you out of your home, okay? That's urging a no vote. So you don't really find cases that are all that gray. Most of this is black and white. Public funds includes public resources. So if you're doing your day job and you receive a W-2 from the Board of Ed or the town of Cheshire, you can't be using your time to advocate for or against the referendum question. You can't be using your computer. If you're issued a phone from the town, you can't be sending text messages or emails or going on social media on a town-issued phone or computer urging for or against the passage of the referendum. There are exceptions to the prohibition, and the exceptions are consistent with the definition of advocacy. You can have communications that are neutral in content. You can have explanatory text, but it has to be approved by the council and by the town attorney. Okay. You can have communications that advise the public as to what the question is, the date that the question will be voted on, the time that the polls are open, and where they vote. There's nothing wrong with letting people know that the question is on the ballot. In fact, you have a duty to do so, and the explanatory text is complementary to any notification. So you could have a sign that says, you know, referendum on election day, November 8th, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., usual polling locations. That's not advocacy. So, you know, to me at least, the rules are pretty clear. And the difference between content neutral communications using public funds and advocacy using public funds is never really a very close call. And like I said, when you read the case law, you know, it's not a close call either. Usually where municipalities and boards of education get in trouble is, you know, somebody prints a flyer. Let's say a PTA or a PTO prints a flyer, vote yes on November 8th. And they give them to the principal of the school. The principal makes 500 copies and they stick them in the kids' backpacks and send them home. I mean, that's the stereotypical, no, that's an election law violation. You're fined $1,000 for using school resources. And there's a civil penalty that's 2 times the amount of the illegal expenditure or $1,000, whichever is greater. You know, I'll tell you that I've defended some of these types of cases for various towns, and the Elections Enforcement Commission isn't really looking to hurt anybody. They're just trying to keep that playing field level. So if it's obvious that you flaunted the rules and you misused public resources, then you're going to get penalized. If it's something that, gee, you know, it really isn't advocacy, I can understand how somebody could have viewed it that way, but it wasn't intended to be advocacy, and we weren't intending to use school resources, which I got to tell you, with social media, it happens. You know, I mean, you could have a video that was taken a month ago that somebody shared on their Facebook page before the referendum was pending, and someone after the referendum was pending shares it again. and then someone files a complaint. And that's, you'll win, but you could understand why somebody would view that as advocacy, because they may not be exactly sure when that video was made, depending on which, if it's on Twitter versus on Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media vehicle you're using. So that's really now, I had one a couple of years ago that was essentially that case where somebody had retweeted and shared on Facebook something that was made before the ban was in place. And it worked out. The SEEC looked at it and said there was no intent. There may be a technical violation, but there's no history of violation. So read the rules and next time be more careful. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, the main thing, again, to understand, because a lot of the questions that we got, if you saw or listened to the Board of Ed questions, there was a concern about, can the Board of Ed discuss scenarios if the referendum doesn't pass, what actions we need to take? And I told them, not only can you, but you should. You do your job as an elected Board of Ed member, you need to plan for all contingencies. And that's not in any way, shape, or form. What you talk about during a meeting is not advocacy. Advocacy is a targeted communication trying to urge someone. And I gave an example. If during the meeting, one of the Board of Ed members picks up the microphone and walks up to the camera and says, and this is why everyone needs to get out on November 8th and vote yes, then, okay, I still think that's a winnable case for me, but you're kind of, again, flaunting the rules, saying I'm taking advantage of the fact that I'm on the board, I'm in a meeting. The lawyer said we could talk about it, so I'm going to advocate. But by and large, you're not going to really, as council members at least, you're not going to really have many opportunities to violate these rules.
Thanks for that explanation. Is this mainly verbal, or, could we put a sign on our front lawn? Could any public buildings put a sign on their front lawn?
If you're not using town resources, in other words, we had a question, the Board of Ed paid for some signs before the referendum was pending. So there was a Board of Ed member that questioned whether she could buy those signs. And my opinion was no, because they were paid for by public funds. And you get into all kinds of issues about what the value of the sign is, whether it had to go out to bid. But at the core, it's public property. So if you want to make a sign and you want to pay for it with your own money and you want to put a sign up, have at it. Now, individual rights do get regulated when you act in concert with multiple people. Okay? If you're going to act with others to raise money for advocacy, then you need to register with the Secretary of State's office and the town clerk's office as a political committee. Everybody calls it a PAC. In Connecticut, they're political committees. I guess they took the action out of it. So that's the only thing. You can't as an individual work in concert with other people, raising, soliciting donations, raising money, spending money on advocacy unless you're registered as a political committee. Again, the idea is level playing field, right? You don't want to have some covert operation where the average citizen wouldn't be able to do what you're doing.
Is it okay for the town or Board of Ed to put out signs? So
What do the signs say? No,
So
not if you vote, not if you send this to referendum tonight.
if we send that, so those signs,
It's okay as of 7:15.
all right, okay. All right,
Can't go in the town parks or anything like that.
No, that's advocacy.
okay.
Oh, sorry, Peter. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jeff, I think what I hear you saying is that this is the one opportunity where we should be thankful that we are unpaid volunteers in our roles.
Right.
But it also puts us at very little exposure, with the exceptions of the things that you clarified for Mr. Walsh. So in other words, we still have our voice, so to speak, and can be out in the public speaking on behalf of what we'd like to support. As long as it's not expending public funds to do so, we're free to do so.
Right. I mean, if you want to walk door to door and tell people what your position is on the referendum question, there's no prohibition on that. If you want to write a letter to the local newspaper or the Register, any newspaper you want, you can do that. You're speaking as an individual. If you want to send an email to a bunch of friends, as long as you use a personal email account and not the town email account, that's fine. The town email account is a resource paid for by public funds. So it's on a server or in the cloud or something to which the town pays money. So you can't use that. And again, the restriction on what you can do personally as a volunteer really has to do with working in concert with other people. Yeah, if you're going to spend more than $1,000, you should register as a political committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I understand there is a PAC that's in formation or is considering being formed. Can we contribute to that?
Yes.
Just following up on the email question, obviously, we may get emails to our town account. So obviously, if the email comes in and says, what's your position on, the school referendum? I guess the question is, if in order to respond to that, I mean, I guess if it was a generic question like, hey, when's the referendum, those type, then we could answer through that email account. But if someone asks our opinion on it, we should respond to them through our personal email, or can we still, because if someone's asking that question and you're now saying, I'm supporting this, and you're responding through your town, your council email, is that okay?
There's actually law on that specific scenario that says unless you have reason to believe that your response is going to be distributed to others, you can respond from your town email account. In other words, if somebody says in an email, I'm asking a question because a lot of people want to know, and if you provide me the answer, I'll make sure I spread it around the PTO or whatever, then that's, you understand the difference,
There's
right?
no expectation.
Somebody asks you a question, you respond to them, it's over. It's not advocacy, right? Somebody asks you a question and suggests or expressly says that they're going to distribute that, then that's advocacy, because you know that your support or your opposition is going to be disseminated to others.
So in that case, if you're going to respond, you should respond through a personal account.
Yes.
Jeff, you brought up, Facebook postings and things like that. And I know our superintendent of schools has obviously done some YouTube videos, which he's since removed, I presume, because they're advocacy, I presume. But what about stuff that's on the town's or the Board of Ed's Facebook page that could be buried, generationally back in terms of Facebook time? And there's something there that wasn't scrubbed, or does it need to be scrubbed? I mean, how does that become a party to these concerns?
Well, it doesn't need to be scrubbed. I mean, you've got a date on that Facebook post, and if that date is prior to August 23rd, it's not an issue. However, if somebody, a public official, whether it's a Board of Ed employee, a Board of Ed member, a town employee, a town official, goes and finds that post and on between now and November 8th, shares it, or whatever you do to make it come up again at the top, right? I think it's sharing, right? And say, hey, don't forget about this.
Right.
Then you're advocating.
Okay.
Because you're taking something you're taking advocacy that was before the referendum was pending, and therefore it doesn't violate the statute, and using it after the referendum is pending. Clearly, for advocacy purposes, what other purpose would there be? I make the argument that even if you didn't say anything, even if let's say there's something from March, and on November 6th, all of a sudden you share it with no comment. Well, okay, you're trying to call everyone's attention to this piece of advocacy while the referendum is pending.
I had one other question. Say, for example, Peter Talbot and I, we live in the same neighborhood and we decide we want to either walk a few doors or maybe have a picnic. It's not a quorum of the council, but if we start discussing it with the people that are there, and it's certainly post vote tonight or whatever, is that a problem?
Well, you're not going to use public funds.
Okay,
You're not going to use public resources. Okay. My suggestion would be, I guess it depends on how much you're going to spend on the picnic.
right.
Are you a good
Very
host,
little.
or
We
are you
haven't
gonna,
talked about
are you
it
gonna
until
serve,
tonight.
are you gonna serve Fritos or filet mignon?
But we could do this, Peter. I just want to know we could, or if there's a risk or whatever, because.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have the picnic and solicit contributions for your advocacy
Okay.
effort.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to invite some people over and say, hey, there's this referendum question coming up on November 8th, and we think you should vote no, or we think you should vote yes,
Right.
that's fine.
Well, because there's going to be groups, there is going to be, for example, the PAC, and they might want one of us to go and say hello.
Well, that's fine.
That's all I want to
Yeah.
know, because that's an example of time we could.
Yeah,
commit to.
participation on your time with the PAC is fine.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say the PAC has a 10 a.m. Meeting and Sean and the superintendent are there, then we got a problem,
Mhm.
because now that they're on town time or Board of Ed time
Budget.
participating in an advocacy effort. If it's hate to do this to you, Sean, if it's Saturday night, have at it.
Sean,
Just related to that, if the PAC wanted to rent one of the town's park facilities and they pay for it, is that okay?
Yes. Yeah, you got to come up with, it's got to be, if you have a schedule of,
Can't
Rental
waive the
rates,
fees or
right,
anything,
right.
That'd be a difference.
it's got to be same access to anybody else.
it's got to be available.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, thank you.
Sure.
Jeff, I appreciate that. I think it's always informative and good to get a reminder. So we appreciate that. Okay, now we go on to the business of the meeting, essentially, and that would be 5, the adoption of additional project appropriations and bonding authorization for fiscal year 2022, 2023 annual capital expenditure budget. Mr. Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we adopted the majority of the capital budget back in end of June or July, we adopted the couple dozen items, and these 3 items that were at the time unknown, some of the sourcing, and they were also items that were had to be adopted in a certain time frame, and we are in that time frame now. And so these 3 items, 2 of which will be referendumable, I'd like to put on the table. It's a motion that has 3 parts. I want to be clear. The motion has 3 parts. I'm not going to read them because it's 6 pages, if you don't mind, but I'll read the introduction. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 082322-2, resolution appropriating $650,000 for design and replacement of the fire alarm system in Dodd Middle School and authorizing the issuance of $450,000 bonds and notes to finance the appropriation. And then it goes on. And resolution appropriating $2.4 million for the road improvement program and authorizing the issuance of $2.4 million bonds and notes to finance the appropriation. And then the third part, resolution appropriating $166,600,000 for the design and construction of a new North End Elementary School and a new Norton Elementary School, and authorizing the issuance of $166,600,000 bonds and notes to finance the appropriation, the amount of such bonds and notes to be reduced by the amount of project grants received, et cetera.
Mr. Bowery, I think it's a good summary. I'm not certain we would necessarily be as comfortable seconding and voting on them all as a group. I could
Well,
be
it is one
mistaken.
motion. It's all
fulfills-
motion number 2.
Okay, I see it's seated that way. I just want to be sure that that's,
Okay, I see your point. You may want to bifurcate it.
well, only because they're certainly bifurcated as a voting issue. I realize we vote on that the next go around, but seeing it as one motion, I don't really have a problem of it. But voting for roads is one thing, voting for 650,000 is one thing, and voting for 166 million is another thing. So I didn't know if we should go one by one. It's subject to
It's
my
entirely,
pleasure.
It's entirely up to you.
I would like to do it at my pleasure and vote it as individually. That's
Individual,
with
okay.
you. So having read the first one, would someone like to second that resolution? Mr. Walsh, thank you. All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that would be the 650 for design and replacement. Number 2 was the 2.4 million for road improvement.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Just a clarification, then, we won't be able to use the resolution number that's at the top, but just all the verbiage that's on that page and the next page is the motion.
Could you letter them A, B, and C?
We could?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't mean to be a troublemaker. I just think it makes more sense.
Oh, yeah, we
This
can have
is
2A, 2B,
2B.
and 2C.
Right.
Just change them in the resolution.
Okay. Any discussion on this one? There's been a second. Any discussion? Okay. Call for a vote on this. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. And the final one.
Second.
You don't want to read that one again?
I would be happy to.
Would you read that one again, please?
Sure, it's a rather important and long one. Resolution 082322-2C. Resolution appropriating 166,600,000, well, start. Fiscal year 23 capital expenditure, what's the B for? Budget number 29. Resolution appropriating $166,600,000 for the design and construction of a new North End Elementary School and a new Norton Elementary School, and authorizing the issuance of $166,600,000 bonds and notes to finance the appropriation, the amount of such bonds and notes to be reduced by the amount of project grants received, resolved, et cetera.
So we have a second from Ms. Nichols. Thank you for the motion. Any discussion on this? I don't want anyone to think we didn't talk about it. Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we have the opportunity, I absolutely will be supporting the motion that's on the table. We sat here, 10 months ago, 11 months ago, when we sat in a candidates forum and all of us were running for office, and to a person, we all agreed that this referendum that we're looking at tonight was the most important thing that we were facing as a council, as a town, and certainly as a Board of Education. We all supported it. We didn't always agree on how we were going to get there, but now that we're here, we are absolutely lockstep with this passing. And again, I absolutely will be supporting the resolution as read by Mr. Barowie tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Anyone else? Ms. Nichols.
Yeah, I would like to second everything that Mr. Talbot said, and as a representative of the council to the meetings in the committee, I agree. There were some difficult times that we had to get to the resolution we have, but those decisions were made with absolute adherence to the facts and the potential good results of doing it this way. I am 100% in agreement with this. If we do not do this now, it will be too many years before we can address the issue again. So as Peter said, and I think most of us and all of us agree, this is something we need to do. So
Thank you. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues as well. This process didn't just start with the school modernization 3 years ago. It started, I think, 17 years ago or many years ago. And people have said, the council has kicked the can down the road so many times. We're not kicking it down anymore. We're here. This is the opportunity for this town. It's one of the largest, it is the largest expenditure that this town has ever seen. And yes, it's a lot of money, but I urge everybody to please, if you're not familiar, because I've heard a lot of different things from people, we haven't vetted this enough. We haven't, we should be doing another school instead of this. Please go and read the school modernization report that came out last year. It explains everything. Having sat through most of the school modernization meetings and being part of that group, I can assure you that we have vetted just about every scenario we possibly could. And if you asked everybody at the beginning of the school modernization what was their idea would be the perfect scenario, it wasn't these two schools. By going through process of elimination, listening to the state, listening to the experts, looking at the enrollment projections, this came out as the ideal plan for us to do. And this is something that this town really needs to do. I think if you think that by voting no to this, we'll come up with another plan next year, it's not going to happen. As Ms. Nichols said, it's going to be a very long time before we get to this point again. So this is my last opportunity to urge you publicly from this forum to please vote in favor of this. But it's important for this town, for the future generations of this town. And I fully support this resolution and look forward to seeing new schools in the next 4 years.
You as taxpayers have all the information that you can possibly need. This is the right time to do this. We are receiving 50% reimbursement. If we don't take advantage of this now, we're not going to do it. We're never going to get the opportunity for the finances that we have now. We do not want to see our students in trailers at the schools. We want to give them the best future that we possibly can, and the future is in our hands and in your hands. So I urge you to vote yes for this project. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Mylon?
Yes, I agree with my colleagues, and I'm fully supportive of this resolution. And I think it's important for townspeople to understand that if they're concerned about details of the projects have not been fully designed yet. And as any development project within the community, we'll go through a regulatory process, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to look at the details of the project, to consider things like traffic impact and architecture and impact on wetlands, et cetera, just like any other development. And it will go through that process. So don't feel that if you vote for this, you don't have an opportunity to have input in the remainder of the project. It's important for people to understand this is a process that will become more detailed and more informative, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for townspeople to be involved in that process.
Very good point. Thank you for that. Mr. Belliber?
Thank you very much. I know we've all been discussing this for a long time, and it's been it's been a great collaboration between the council and the Board of Education over the last few years to really try to bring this to where we are now. I recognize that this may not be what everyone in town wants. It may not be what all of us want. It may not, there obviously have been other alternatives. There's some said, why don't we have a middle school? Why don't we do nothing? Why don't we just fix or expand what's existing? We recognize that this is an expensive project, and we're going to have to address that. But the current state of our schools and potential enrollment projections, this is designed to address those issues, and in a way that we address the needs of the system, not necessarily the wants of the system. And, I know I was surprised when we got into this process and we really learned, we all thought we were going one way with the school system, and then the reports and everything else brought us to a different conclusion that, in elementary school and the enrollments there and the limitations on those elementary schools was really what was kind of limiting our school system. And as we've heard especially over the last few months, the enrollment projections already have grown beyond what was even projected just a year ago. So we're already seeing that in the elementary school system. So I think this is the right path that we're facing, based on the situation that we're facing in town. I said, I know it's expensive, but this is a choice that we're going to be faced with for both the improvement of our school systems and the improvement of our town going forward. And we will, put the information out there and put it in the hands of the voters to see where they want to go. But I think this is a process that we've gone through, and one that will provide growth and opportunities for our schools and also for our town over the next decades.
Mr. Bauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a responsible plan. This is a plan that has been worked in a partnership with the Board of Ed, but in partnership with the Citizens Committee, the SMC, for years. They have reviewed what the data is, and the data is the students are coming. And the data is that we have old school buildings. And we had somebody speak at our last council meeting saying that let's get more efficient. We are. We're taking 3 old school buildings, and it's going to be consolidated down to 2 new modern buildings. It's affordable in that we have pushed off a lot of other capital items, and we've cleared the deck for the last year or more in capital items and narrowed it down so that it would mitigate some of the impact to our residents. Is it affordable to everybody in the way that they want it to be? No, but I would ask everybody to consider this. Anybody who has a multi-bedroom home that they live in is going to have more value if the schools are better, because then when they go to sell that home, they're going to have people that will pay more for that home than they would if the schools have trailers and if the schools have all these other old buildings that just don't have the amenities that a modern, good, solid education should have. You know, when my grandparents moved here in the 30s, they were lucky that people, you know, had good schools before that. And then when my parents in the 60s moved here after getting married, or she stayed here, but moved here, they also had good schools, and the people before them had voted for them. And in the 90s, when I was on the council, we voted on the last time. It seems every generation there's an opportunity to do this, and it's time. You know, people like me, my kids are gone now. They're out of schools. They graduated from Cheshire schools. I'm supporting this because I know there's the next generation to come. And that's how the history works. And that's where it's time for us to step up and accept this responsible plan and vote for it. And I intend to support it now, and I intend to support it for the next however many days till Election Day.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Mr. Jinks.
Thank you, Mr. This is one of those everything's been said, but not everyone has said it yet kind of moments. So I would just say that, I mean, I've been involved in this process for a few years now as well. And I've been supportive of investing in our school buildings for many years before that. So I don't think it'll come as any surprise that I'm fully supportive of this going to referendum and fully supportive of us building new schools in town. It's been 50 years since we built a school. The oldest one is 1971, which is exactly as old as I am. So, and our other schools are much older. So it's clearly it's time to do this. We need to continue to invest in our greatest resource, which is our schools and our students and our families. So, like I said, I'm fully supportive of this and intend to vote in favor. And I urge everyone to do the same. And also, as many of us said, that the Board of Ed has good resources on the website, and there's resources out there to find out more about the thinking and the thought process that went into this plan and being the best plan to go forward with at this moment. So thank you very much, and I'm ready to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Jinks. Well, I get the last word after all, and I don't mind waiting. No one said anything that I'm going to say. Number one, thank you. You all said that, I know. But I want to thank, actually, before I throw my great support to this, my full support to this, I want to thank everybody who's really been involved in a very long process. It sort of began with a middle school. Maybe that's almost 5-6 years ago. The process, the council adopted planning money specifically for the Board of Ed to go out and do an investigation of what might be appropriate and desired and the best thing. And there was the talk of the middle school that didn't quite prevail. It never made it to a referendum, but the thought process behind that was we needed perhaps to be a little more collaborative with the legislative body as well as the Board of Ed. And that brought about, under Rob Orris's leadership, the formation of our past chairman, I should say, Rob Orris, the formation of the School Modernization Committee, which was no easy task. It was a long task, hindered by COVID and all kinds of other things that made that job a little bit longer and maybe a little bit harder than it had to be. But it did, as David said, result in some answers I don't know that any of us were seeking. We sort of ended up at a place that pointed to couple of elementary schools. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, not everybody who lives in their home remembers that we didn't have all-day kindergarten. All-day kindergarten's huge. Suddenly you don't have 2 kindergarten classes in every school. And you know, you have them taking up twice the spaces they may have, 25 years ago when they were going to their home schools. That's one reason. There's also, special ed needs, and there's also just the beauty of a changeover in a lot of housing stock in town. We see it. They're building new homes in Cheshire quite a lot. I know real estate is subject to all kinds of stuff that happens, but a lot of people are moving to Cheshire. We know there's big building projects already underway and in the works, talking 150 units in the north end. There's apartments being built on the west end. So the town is a place people want to be. And I think that's good. And it's been driven by, in many respects, good governance, good schools. In fact, they're going to say good schools first. They're never going to say I moved to Cheshire because Tim Slocum's chairman of the council. But the point is, we do run a good town over the last 50 years insofar as there's committed individuals to how the town should be in their estimation. And to that, I speak to the effort that's gone on between this body, the Board of Ed. We've put a heck of a lot of effort into this effort. And we think it's been thoughtfully done. We've used resources, precious dollars the taxpayer has provided in planning money. We've used experts. We've done what we could to arrive at the best plan. And as all of us have said, seek out the information that's going to make you better informed. We're doing everything we can to make that possible. And feel free to call any one of us. We know the advocacy restrictions, but there again, this is America, freedom of speech. We get to talk back. So that's what we'll do. We want your questions. We want you to be engaged. And most of all, before we vote on this to put it to you in November, we want you to vote for this in November. We think it's the best thing for the community, absolutely the best thing. And it's a tall order for everybody. Rob Orris used to say it was a heavy lift. I never knew where it came from that, but I know what it is. That's the best way to describe it. It's a heavy lift for every taxpayer in this town. But once it's an uplifting lift. I mean, it's going to upgrade and uplift our community. So with that, I am going to thank you for your indulgence and call for a vote on this. All those in favor signify. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and thank you. Okay, with that. Okay, we move to 6, which is the adoption of the 5-year capital expenditure plan for fiscal year 2022-2023 through 2026-2027.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Now that the 29 items that compose the capital budget for this year are completed, adopted, and moved forward, I would like to adopt the total approval. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 082322-3. Be it resolved that the Town Council adopts the 5-year capital expenditure plan for fiscal years 23 through 27.
Thank you. We have a motion. Thank you, Ms. Favano. We have a second. Discussion? We know what it's all about. I guess all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for that. Okay, 7 is the approval of submission of referendum questions and authorization for explanatory text. Mr. Bowery.
I wasn't sure. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 082322-4. Be it resolved that the resolution entitled Resolution Appropriating 2.4 million, et cetera. If that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that meets with any normal standard of. Okay. As long as we know bond counsel read it all, right? Okay. So further discussion, or are we all set? All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Now we move on to 8, which is the approval of the town manager's contract. I think we should have done this first, but Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 082322-05. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves an employment contract for Town Manager Sean M. Kimball for the term July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2025, pursuant to the terms presented and attached. Be it further resolved that as of July 1st, 2022, this contract shall supersede the current contract with the term July 1, 2021 to June 30, 2024.
Motion, we have a second. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Discussion.
Just a simple note that we have reviewed Mr. Kimball's performance and are pleased to offer him a addition to his salary that's commensurate with all other town employees, and to extend his contract for another year. The total, let me see if I can find, I can't remember without reading it. Where's the number of your salary amount? Come on. Here it is. $176,500 will be his annual salary going forward. And the contract will go along for an additional year beyond what he started. In addition to that, we have offered another 5 days of sick leave to complement his current pay, and we continue to pay an allowance for his vehicle. He does not have a town vehicle, but we continue to pay a stipend for that. He is part of our deferred compensation plan and will be allowed to contribute his own funds to a 401k. And other than that, the terms are the same. We're pleased to offer that to him. I think we all agree that his job has been very successful, and we're pleased with his performance to date. So,
Well stated. I don't know if we want to embarrass the town manager more. You didn't embarrass him by any means.
I hope not.
But we could all run home runs his way. Would
Right.
anyone want to see anything? Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here's another resolution that I absolutely will be supporting tonight. You know, Sean came to us a few years ago, and it hasn't exactly been a smooth road that he's had. Right off the bat, Mother Nature threw some curveballs his way. He's been through a global pandemic, so he's had his baptism and has survived it very well. I'll absolutely support the new 3-year contract, as well as the increase, and we're very happy to have you.
Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also will wholeheartedly support this resolution. I'm happy to do that. As Mr. Talbot said, it hasn't been a smooth road these past few years, and Sean has done a tremendous job. I also appreciate the time and effort that all of us council members took to evaluate him. We came up with a process that I think really helped us look into his job and his job description and develop his future goals too as well. But I think, the time and effort that we put into it, we realized, that he is performing above what our expectations were. He is doing a tremendous job. And I think this town is also very lucky to have somebody of Sean's stature in our community. So I again will wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anyone else? Ms. Pavano.
I agree with everything that's been said, but sitting here on the council, I have to say, we ask a lot of Sean, and I have to say, you are an absolute pleasure to work with. And Cheshire is very lucky to have you. And we gave you a very good evaluation only because we know what you've gone through in the past few years, but we also want you to stay in Cheshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Villabur.
Well, I think I'll echo all the comments. It's been a pleasure, Sean, since getting on the council around the same time as you're starting. It's been a great experience working with you and all the things that not only do you do, but you've been able to accomplish, and probably most importantly, some of the new ideas that you've brought to the town and really brought sort of made some significant changes in town that really have blossomed into some great opportunities for the town. But I also, so I think we all agree that, this is well worth it, and we really want to encourage you to stay, and that's important. But I do think it's also important that it's nice that you're also a resident of Cheshire, and that you, not only are you the town manager, but you're invested in making sure that your home stays the best it can be. So thank you for that, and I will wholeheartedly support this resolution. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, Sean, I can only say thank you. It's a pleasure. I know we all enjoy your company and your advice and all that other good stuff. And certainly I like your role in the community. You play a nice role in the community. You're there for events. You're there for that. You stand up just like our buddy Jim Jinks. You show in the community, which is also just a gift of God. Not quite as much, Mr. Jinks. That's true. It's true. But Mr. Jinks, you don't make as much either, though. But beyond all of that, Sean, I as a council member and all my colleagues look forward to working with you in the coming year, because you have invested your time, effort, and energy into transformations in town hall with staff changes, things that didn't come about with firings and things that were difficult, but just the people that have come on board that are helping our town become a better place. Just it is. It's just better in town hall, and that's to no one's discredit. I'm just saying what I observe. So with that, I will certainly support this, and I will now call for a vote. All those in favor? Vote carries unanimously.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all for the kind words. I appreciate it.
There really should be a town manager's report now, but but we'll wait for next month.
Still waiting on pizza.
Okay, now we get to the hard part, the approval of the draft of the town manager's goals and objectives for 2022-2023. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved that the town council approves Resolution 082322-6. Be it resolved that the town council approve the town manager's 2022-2023 goals and objectives as presented and attached per the recommendation of the Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We have a motion and a second. Discussion, please.
Just a quick, this is housekeeping duties, but the Personnel Committee has been challenged with working with the town manager to come up with general goals and objectives for the town, for his staff, for the coming year, each year. And those goals and objectives are reviewed by the council, and we all agree to prioritize those. And rather than go through all 42 of them, I'm going to just take them down into categories, but there are some general goals for economic development to support the growth in a strategic way, so that's complementary to the current business as well as potential new businesses. And there are a lot of pieces there. The finance department has been fantastic and kept us in a AAA credit rating, and we want those things to be goals and objectives to continue as we go through the school modernization committee, school modernization project. Public health and safety has been a serious issue we've dealt with, and you've done remarkably well with many, many challenges. And so we want to work with Chespercott to make those smoother. We've improved recreational activities, and with new park coming up and other projects, those are high on the priority list. And so the main let me see, one more, education, we just did that. So the education is to work with the implementation of the school modernization and make sure that we continue our progress with the Board of Education. So those are the general goals. The capital projects that we're dealing with in the next couple of years are Chapman Bartlam Park, Mixville Park operations, the new pavilion at Mixville Park, Emergency Operations Center, which you've just read about in the paper, that it will be in the basement of the town hall. We're asking him to provide leadership and support as we go through the financial planning and technical resources for the new schools. And we're working to upgrade some of the spaces within this town hall that are kind of old and shabby. So we'd like to see those look a little bit better for our public when they come in. So those are the major goals and objectives that we have discussed, and they came as a result of some collaborative workshops that we had with the entire council and with Sean. And I think they're good goals to do and well achievable. And as Don said, we came up as part of that with a method to evaluate the performance on those in a more specific manner for next time around. So I urge you all to support them.
Anyone else? Mr. Talbot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much on the goals per se, but I did want to take the opportunity to thank Personnel Committee Chairwoman Nichols and my colleague on the committee, Mr. Walsh, for their efforts. This was a long process, but it was also a long overdue process to really formalize this and codify a procedure that will be in place hopefully for years to come. And it also provides the town manager with the feedback he needs from this body to do the best job that he can do. So I'm fully in favor of this and will absolutely support it. And I thank my colleagues again.
Anyone else? Mr. Malone?
I also did want to take a moment to thank the Personnel Committee on all the work they've done. As a new member of the council, I've watched all the work they've done this year, and it's been incredible. It's been very productive and very professional in every respect, and this is just a culmination in my view of that excellent work by all those members of the committee. So I did want to thank them, and I did want to thank our town managers. Again, first time on the council, I found them to be extremely professional and very, very organized and helpful in the management of our community. And I just wanted to emphasize one thing. His leadership in terms of the culture of the community is very important, and his focus on customer service has been wonderful. And as he continues on, and I know he'll emphasize that, I think it's so important that culturally we follow his leadership and we continue to be a community that's serving our residents. So, thank you.
Well said. Anyone else? Well, I too would like to thank personnel. Obviously, these goals and objectives, as Peter said, were perhaps long overdue. Not to say our town managers never had goals and objectives, but to take the real objective look at what we're doing here. Personnel did take it on. They did an excellent job. And personnel, I would say, over the last maybe it's 2 years already, but it's been a very, very busy committee. It's been productive. We've gone through contract negotiations, but we've managed to do this as well, which I think is equally important. And to that, I really want to thank members of the committee because I think you've done a terrific job. And you'll definitely get the job again, should it be reassigned to you.
Can I just respond to that? Yeah. I don't know. It has been a challenging year, but with these two gentlemen together, we have worked very well together and had some lively discussions to get to where we are. But we've been very thoughtful. So I hope that our job has been productive and will continue to be so.
I'm sure it will. Okay, so with that and nothing further than a vote, let's go ahead and call for a vote on this. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we arrived at number 10, which is adjournment.
We adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor? Mr. Anecki? Oh,
Yeah, sure.
I didn't know you were here.
Mr. Elnicki, you're right. I should have, but I think I knew you wanted to talk probably around referendum question. So let's just have at it. You do have to be at the mic. And this is a heck of a nice way to say farewell.
Ray Olnicki, 355 Sandbank Road, Cheshire.
Welcome
First
back.
thing I want to say is I commend every one of you people because I don't think that the public has any idea the amount of time and effort and material and everything that goes into the process to get where you are today. I followed this since George Bowman was on the Board of Education, 2010. That's how far I've been following this. And I've seen all the progression going forward. And I'll stop at that because I know everybody wants to go home, but I want to ask you this question. The $166 million, and Timmy and Peter put an article in the paper, Cheshire Herald, last week that said the average taxpayer was going to cost them $39 more per month. Is that before the 50% reimbursement from the state or after?
So the calculation is based, that's a good question. The calculation is based maybe unfairly on the average price of a house and 2 cars in town. Obviously, there's prices higher and lower, but it's based on what will be actually bonded by the town of Cheshire, which is closer to 94 million, I believe, because not every cost expended on the buildings, if you divide 166.6 by 2, you don't come up with 94. They're not 100% reimbursable, 50% reimbursable, but whatever it is, that bonded amount is what we are referencing because that's what the local taxpayer really will be taxed for. Not 166. The
Okay.
net of the bonded cost for Cheshire. So the offsetting cost is essentially, we can't unfortunately in the language ask you to vote for 94 million because it sounds more palatable. We have to put the full price out there of the construction. And then we state in explanatory text that we're bonding for 94 and change. I hope I'm not misquoting that. But that's essentially how that calculation for the taxpayer is determined,
Okay.
based on the bonded debt associated with those 2 projects.
Okay, my second inquiry is, we talked a little bit about it. I think that this council has to put an article in the paper and explain to the public. I mean, there's no public here. I'm the public.
Right.
I talk to a lot of people, and I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people right now that are under the assumption that we're still going through the new generation 3-phase program, and it's going to cost this town by the year 2054 $560 million, because that's what the Cheshire Herald, I have all of the articles. This is what everybody's reading. This is what everybody believes. So if you're changing the game plan, then the public needs to know about it. And the other thing is, I had asked Timmy at the last time I came to the meeting at the Cheshire Library, are you going to disguise the question? I read the question. You're not going to disguise it. But 2 years from now, 3 years from now, are you going to open the door again, and the $39 that you're paying now for the first phase, are you going to open the door for renovations and stuff? And is that going to piggyback the $39? And is the taxpayers' monthly amount going to go up, up, up for another 15 years? That has got to be explained to the public too.
Yeah, and I think that's a reasonable question, but there could be a master plan for anything. Just like we adopted the 5-year capital budget. We really only voted on appropriations for year 1, which were massive this year. But the bottom line is we do have to, as a community, plan for every number of eventualities. The master plan that was sort of conceived by the School Modernization Committee is not a piece of the 5-year capital plan. What's in that plan tonight is 2 school buildings. So should the people at home conclude that there may be no future renovating in schools because of this vote they make tonight? I would say probably not, because we will always have to do upgrades here and there. But I can't foresee a project that is going to take until 2026 to be complete is going to be a new project that's going to be put on their doorstep in 2 years when we haven't even moved into buildings 1 and 2. So it seems to me there was some master planning done by people that, understand what potentially needs to be done. But it can't be imposed on the voter because we just can't do it. So the answer, I guess, Ray, the quick answer is you're voting yes or no to build 2 new school buildings, and you take your chance with everything else as a resident of Cheshire. But it's just, you're not going to see any new school buildings after that.
So it is a
Quite a while.
little tiny bit misleading, because we're not giving the people, the public, what the future is for the school system. We're not saying, okay, the 166 million for Norton and Chapman is going to take 6 years to do. At the end of 6 years, we're going to go into, let's call it phase 2 again. Phase 2, and we're going to do renovations to Dodd and to
That could
Highland and-
happen. That could happen, Ray.
See, it,
That could happen. So it's not that it's misleading, but we can only approve and move forward with what we can approve and move forward with.
but that's what all of the
We've
people are
never
thinking.
taken, well, no, but if you think about it, we've never, as a town, voted on a plan, $500,000 plan. You don't vote on plans like that. There was one that was presented as a goal-setting agenda. But it's master planning. It's not what you're taxed on today or tomorrow. And you always have a say. The voters always have a say with these issues because it's not what we say. We voted tonight, said a lot of nice things about new schools. There's 9 votes up here, just like you make it 10. Who knows how it's going to go?
No, I get it. But the thing of it is, I am confused. I am confused as a taxpayer. I'm confused as a person who lives in the town of Cheshire. What's going to happen with the school system? I get the 166 for the 2 schools, but somehow I just think that somewhere along the line, there's a little devious approach that is going to say, hey, you know what? Now we got to do Dodd. Now we got to do
Well, I
Doolittle.
don't think anything in your vote, in our vote tonight says you don't have to do something to Dodd. You don't have to do something to Doolittle, that won't happen in 5 or 6 years. I don't think any of this vote says that won't happen. But this vote doesn't say it will either. It's all going to come down to planning. It can perhaps be expressed better by a colleague of mine. Peter, you may want to say something. You mentioned it.
The only thing I'd say, and Tim has been absolutely accurate with his statements. The only thing I'd say to maybe further clarify is that this council tonight, as we sit here, is putting this effort, the 166.6, to referendum for the voters. That project takes 4 years. You're looking at the potential for 2 different councils now down the road who may undergo the discussion to look at some other aspect of the schools. But as we sit here tonight, the only thing we're putting forward is what is being put onto referendum on November 8th.
So in far,
There is no guarantee of any future, and there's no guarantee that there won't be any future.
so insofar, Pete, of what you just said, you let the agenda carry over from this council to the new council if it happens.
A
Look, I
new,
mean, look
a
at all
new
the work
council
you-
sets their own agenda.
Look at all of the work that the SMC did, okay, for the past 8 years. Look at all of the work that they did. You can't just take that and throw it out the window. They came up with all different kinds of schemes till they got to the new generation plan. That's something that everybody understood. Hey, there's going to be a phase 1, there's going to be a phase 2, a phase 3, and everybody understood it. And there was a total of, it was $540 million. And then I can't remember, the Warrington at one of the meetings said, hey, it's going to be an extra 20 million because we didn't, so it went up to 560 million. Well, by the time you get around to do that in this day and age, that's going to be $1 billion. And it's not going to be on you guys. It's going to be on the next council and the next council. I understand that, but it's going to ultimately come down on the taxpayer living in the town who originated with the $39, and now he's roped in for phase 2 and for phase 3.
But understand as well that at every step of the way, if a future council does decide to put something for the schools to referendum, the town, the electorate of this town always has the opportunity and the final say in whether that moves forward or not.
Yeah, I understand that. I just think you ought to be transparent to the public. And I think that you ought to put an article in the paper depicting on where this is going. That's all.
Mr. Lenicky, I agree with both of what they're saying, but, and I also agree with you that that there is a master plan, but the master plan doesn't have all the details. It purposely left options out. For instance, Dodd. Let's say 8 years from now, we decide we need to look at Dodd, decide whether it's a new building or renovation. It may very well be that the renovation of Dodd at that time will only cost as much as the debt service on the sewer plant, which will be coming off at that time. And therefore, it may not have any tax consequences
So,
because you have something $30 million sewer plant that comes off. It may be a net of $30 million to do a renovation to Dodd instead of a new building at that time. So I think it would be hard for us to pick the worst case scenario and say, oh yeah, it's going to cost all this much when there are other options that could be significantly less that will have to be looked at the time. And it may be that it has to be a lesser option if we need another sewer plant for some reason. I mean, that may take priority.
so all of the money that we gave to Colliers is out the window?
No,
Because
no,
they
no,
came
not
up
at
with a
all.
plan?
No, not
And
at
now
all.
we're not
but-
going to follow it?
No, I would not say that a future council's held to that in detail because there's still options. The Colliers plan, and I think Mr. Walsh is ready to say something of that because he was on that committee. They did not have specific detailed examples that had to be followed that way. It said, yes, something's going to need to be done to Dodd, and something's going to need to be done to Highland, and something's going to need to be done to Doolittle next. Doesn't say specifically necessarily whether it's a total renovation or whether it's a renovate like new or whether it's just fix up and, put a new roof and put some air conditioning at a much lesser cost. The townspeople have to decide what level they want. Do they want the Ford? Do they want the Cadillac? What do they want?
I
Right now,
understand it,
it's a
but
practical
they got to
car.
know what they're buying, David. They have to know that.
Right, but it may be that they choose to buy something that has no net tax increase because a big item comes off the tax rolls and they choose the lesser version of it.
So are we done with Colliers?
Oh, I hope not. I think they did a great
I think
job.
I'd like to just bring this around, Ray. Number one, Colliers could be a party to an RFP as a construction management firm. I mean, that anything can happen there. I don't know if there's any way to arrest your concern regarding future actions of a council. Simply because things evolve. The schools will not have gotten younger. There may be needs that do become the need to fix that school. I think for the town to not consider that that's a possibility, it's just, it's a bit silly. Does it mean we can present it at referendum in 5-6 years? I don't know. I won't be here, and I doubt that we could do this too many times. I know it will have its weight to bear. So I think as a matter of trust, I don't want to say you just have to trust us, but I know every member of this council, everyone who's worked on this project is trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. But we can't predict there's going to be another September 12th or 11th in the town of Cheshire, next year either. There are certain things, they're unknowable. So
No, I
don't know
understand.
I don't know how to assuage your concerns.
I understand all of the different avenues that we have to go down. I completely get it.
Good.
But why we're here is because we're planning for the future. And if you don't tell the people,
You
I
just
expect
said it
this
all.
and I expect
We're
this and I
planning for
expect
the
that, then you
future.
know what? Then they lose confidence.
Well,
And
that's true, and that they could, but I think the fact that there is planning for the future is how people also gain a foothold on what that future might look out. And it could mean that they're going to walk, I don't know, and it could mean that, oh, this is good. They're thinking long-term. They're thinking of this and thinking of that. There's two ways to look at every plan, but we're only looking at the plan we voted on tonight. That's all that's before the voters. There's not another way to say it. You won't be voting on something else. You just won't be. So I don't know what
you're
else to
buying the
say.
car, you're putting the front left wheel on, and the other three are wearing out. And sometime you're going to have to put the tires all the way around the whole car. You can't keep on going. That's all I'm saying, Tim.
Well, we got three old schools that have come offline. We took care of 3 old tires when we're working on a couple
Yeah.
of brand new ones.
Poke
It's
and
all,
hope.
it's all part of the process.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you very
everybody.
much.
Have a good evening.
Okay. Oh, we did.
We voted.
Oh, you don't want to do it again? Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.